Good afternoon, everybody. I am First Alert Chief Meteorologist Casanova Nurse. I'm here in the First Alert Forecast Center at ABC 27 here in the Tallahassee, Florida region. We are conducting a live stream here on Facebook and likely other digital streams to let folks know that we have the active weather beginning to approach our region from the west, and it's already starting to impact some counties along the Flint River in the form of an advancing line of strong winds and heavy rain. That's with this anticipated squall line that we've been talking about for several days now, and it's beginning to enter more of our local region. So I'll be on here through the next several minutes. I do have some broadcast duties to do at the bottom of the hour at 3:30 to let our over-the-air and cable and satellite viewers in on what's going on. But for now, as long as we keep things at a severe thunderstorm level and not a tornadic level, we'll maintain our digital streams here to keep folks who are online informed of what's going on. Maybe you got the alert through our Storm Shield app. That's a very useful tool in case you are not in a warning zone, but you realize that there can be some rough weather. Get your friends to download it too so they can be prepared. But here's what we're looking at right now. You see this flashing yellow zone that encompasses several areas of southwest Georgia around Lake Seminole and as far south as northern Liberty County. That's our severe thunderstorm warning. The first one within our local region now in effect until 4 o'clock. And it simply means that we do have this band of thunderstorms beginning to push its way through the tri-state junction, capable of producing some strong winds. And we'll highlight the areas that have the greatest risk in the short-term period. Essentially, if you are within that flashing yellow box there, including communities like Chattahoochee, Bainbridge, Donaldsonville, Iron City, Colquitt, Georgia, Newton, Georgia, Camilla, just outside of Pelham even, that's going to be a zone where you need to be on guard of impending bad weather. Gustier winds on top of what we've already had today are likely to be experienced within this zone. And where you see the red highlights on the radar imagery, that's where we have the most intense rain activity. And there's even a lightning tracker that we're having at the top left, top right of your viewing screen. We don't have a whole lot of active lightning flashes, but there are a few within this general range over the last 10 minutes. But what we are looking at is quite a lot of wind force that's going along with this band of thunderstorms. So I'm going to adjust some tools here on our Titan radar system, bring up what we call a velocity mode based out of the radar site at Tallahassee. I may even adjust that to use maybe a site that's a little bit closer to get a little more of a distinct view of what these thunderstorms are capable of doing when it comes to wind. One thing to keep in mind is that some of these thunderstorms and some of the data being shown on the velocity mode is not necessarily indicative of what's happening at ground level. I could go through the science, I won't go too deep, but the radar beam travels up, not just over in a horizontal sense. It travels up. So there may be times where the radar beam is detecting a wind gust at a higher level, maybe 3,000–4,000 feet. That could be a little bit misleading if you're looking at numbers like this and thinking, well, why is there a severe thunderstorm warning if the winds are only 29 miles per hour? I don't think that's a fair estimate or example of what the winds may be capable of doing. This may be a little more representative, but again, there's still the issue of maybe a long distance beam from the radar having to travel a long distance. But nonetheless, the point being is that these thunderstorms here have had a history of producing some gustier winds. You don't really need a whole lot of major enhancement to get even stronger wind gusts to form under these conditions, especially considering just how windy and gusty it's been all day today, even before any thunderstorms have arrived. So these thunderstorms will keep on pushing, and they will generate gustier winds around this region, especially within this zone of the severe thunderstorm warning. The thunderstorm action has been moving fairly steadily. It hasn't really been dragging itself, especially when it comes to individual thunderstorms. They have been moving at a faster rate than the entire line, but we'll throw a 1 hour loop on this and you can get an idea of just how things have evolved and how they're progressing over the last hour. And as the thunderstorm has pushed out of the Alabama wiregrass region, beginning to enter the Flint River Valley, that's where we're starting to encounter other atmospheric trends coming together and kind of congealing near our region to allow these storms to further intensify. And I think that's the mode that we're looking at right now, especially with some of these inland storms. And over the next few minutes, we'll also navigate even offshore to show you activity that's happening there, which may be of broader concern for more of our region as the afternoon goes on. But this is the scope of the band of rain. It's Sammy Squires is here with us, and if you can maybe find that severe weather warning product and just give me a quick rundown as far as how fast it's going. And I'll try to pull it up on my end as well, just to get a rate of speed of the movement of this thunderstorm, which still has the potential to cause quite a lot of wind gusts. Maybe not every location getting the same equivalent strong gusty wind, but the winds will be kicking quite a bit. And based on what I see here, it's moving east at 25 miles per hour. So based on that, we will put a projection with this estimated time of arrival, the storm tracker mode, given that it's moving at about 25 miles per hour, basically to the east. There's going to be a lot of communities that show up on this map, but really if you're near the Lake Seminole area, you will start to get in on this activity sooner than other areas. So it does mention here in our list numerous communities within the Jackson County area and heading into Decatur County as well. Sycamore, you're included in there, in Gadsden County, at least here at this perspective. So within the next 10 to 20 minutes, I'd say for most areas, if you are west of the Flint River, there will be some quick deterioration of the weather conditions in your area. Your town may not be listed here on this list. We'll do this again so the system can reanalyze the action going over the next few minutes. But nonetheless, if you are within this zone, it's a good idea to make sure you're staying inside. And we'll go zone by zone with this over the next few minutes as well to see if there's any other stronger features that may warrant some concern. I'll also put on what's called a skit tracker on our system. It'll try to identify individual spots within the line if there's any more intensification as far as winds or rotation or hail. It'll highlight that when it analyzes the data connected to the radar. Right now it's not showing anything of major concern when it comes to a circulation or a spin-up tornado, so we're not looking at that threat imminently for right now. But nonetheless, over the next 20 minutes, folks in Bainbridge, for example, in Chattahoochee, it's definitely a good idea to make sure that you are inside. I know a lot of school districts let their kids out early today. Maybe if you were not one of those school districts and dismissal is right about now, not necessarily a great time. I know a lot of precautions were taken, though, to avoid having a lot of people out in the midst of this weather. So hopefully you are in a place where you don't necessarily have to be out and about. And I'm speaking specifically of areas around Lake Seminole at this current time. If you're watching from Valdosta or Tallahassee or Perry or another location, this storm line is still a few hours off, 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours in the case of the Suwannee River. So you still have adequate time to monitor, but when it comes to the time to take action to make sure you're shielded from any kind of wind gust concerns, now is the time if you are within the scope of the Apalachicola River, just south of Lake Seminole and along the Flint River too. So here's a zone that we're monitoring here, beginning to emerge into the eastern side of Jackson County and far northeastern Calhoun County, as well as southernmost Seminole County. So this is a zone where we're going to have those stronger winds taking place right about now. If you're in Shady Grove, if you're in Grand Ridge, if you're in Sneads perhaps, this thunderstorm will be heading in your direction very shortly. So there's the reality that you don't have to have the heavy rain overhead to get in on the wind gusts. And again, I mentioned earlier, it's been just breezy to begin with, even long before any storms have arrived. So that's the reasoning behind there's going to be a little more force with the wind gusts when the storms actually get into your area. So that's what we're looking at. Grand Ridge right about now, Sneads within the next probably 5 minutes or less, Ocheesee Gardens, and then to the east of there in Chattahoochee. If you are watching from there, you definitely have a short amount of time to prepare for the onset of this gusty wind threat, as the entire line is moving to the east at about 25 miles per hour. And given the distance from where the thunderstorm line is to Chattahoochee, right now just passing through Grand Ridge, it's roughly about 9 miles to your west. So it's not going to take much time for it to get to you, and those gustier winds will start to have an impact in your area too. Shifting a little bit to the north, let's focus in on Seminole County. I know there were a few folks I've talked to online who are within Seminole County, Donaldsonville proper. We want to make sure you are properly informed. Donaldsonville, you've had the thunderstorm line already go through, so you still have the heavy rain, maybe a little less of the wind force, but it's still going to be pretty rough, at least for a time, to deal with the impacts that have been going on. This will be moving into areas such as the Smith's Landing vicinity, over towards Brinson, as well as some areas, especially some of the camping facilities on the east bank of the Lake Seminole area. This will move into those regions within the next 10 to 20 minutes, I would say, with the same threats of strong gusty winds and certainly the heavy rain that will be flowing down. And those will certainly be adversities that you'll have to deal with if you are caught out in this. So if you do have that time right now to find some interior safe shelter, this is definitely the time to do so, including in Bainbridge. It may be about another 20 minutes or more before it gets to you, but it will be moving in. So folks and friends in Bainbridge and surrounding communities in Decatur County, just be aware of the presence of this thunderstorm, its overall movements scooting to the east. Individual spots within the thunderstorm are moving northeast, but the whole line has more of an easterly movement. So the slower movement to the east, it's definitely less than the individual elements within these thunderstorms that are racing to the northeast. So there's going to be a lot of motion in the atmosphere, in the lower atmosphere. The heavy rain will help to accelerate the wind gusts in some extent. So that is something to keep in mind. Plus, we'll have to monitor individual points within this thunderstorm line if there's any kind of enhancement when it comes to the overall wind field, of course, with a very strong south wind, and then you have the push of wind coming in at a higher level from maybe the southwest. That can promote some circulation if that were to take place. Right now, we're not highlighting any of that particular action right now, so this does look primarily to be a straight line wind concern. And that's what's going to be impacting many of these areas. I haven't seen any kind of signature that would give me an idea that a tornado is forming within this. Not seeing that right now, but just given the healthy flow of winds, especially close to the ground level, 1,000 feet up, 10,000 feet up. It's the environment that's really in motion, in swift motion, and that's what's going to create such the wind hazard that's being anticipated as this line makes its steady progress towards the east. So right now, it's mostly the straight line winds. And in fact, there are some sources I'll probably access while we're on the stream here to identify different wind patterns and different observations, which we can help to maybe verify some of the strength that these storms are beginning to provide for some more of our areas. There have been at least a few spots within our, not within our general region, but in the wake of this line of storms, as it's been moving into the eastern panhandle, we have seen reports of some wind damage even before any thunderstorms arrived. Even within our own general region. If you have our news app, you may have gotten the push alert about the closure of Interstate 10 in the eastern part of Madison County thanks to earlier blowing dust. That's the report there from earlier this morning. I'm not sure of the status of the interstate at this current time, but that was an effect of thunderstorm winds, not non-thunderstorm winds. This was just a steady push of wind coming in from the south. There were also some gustier winds across Metro Tallahassee, and I'm sure many of you have been feeling that. Some of those occurring even early this morning. So we do have the ongoing threat of the overall wind force, as strong as it already is, becoming stronger thanks to the movement of this thunderstorm line. Let's check in on the northern edge of this line for our friends, followers, and whatnot across interior southern Georgia. If you're watching from Miller County, from Baker or Mitchell County here on our Facebook and other digital streams, this thunderstorm is just passing through Colquitt, Georgia. This will head towards the east. Cooktown and Bellevue, you're in the imminent path of this broad thunderstorm line. I have not noticed any kind of twisting motion embedded within the line, so we're looking okay in that regard as far as tornadic activity. It doesn't look like it's at a very high level of potential right now, but if you are farther east from this line, in Camilla, in Newton, along the Flint River, this will be heading into your area within the next 20 minutes or so. So you do have still some time to make sure you're inside. Keep the stream going. Hopefully the power doesn't cut out, but if you're on a mobile device or some battery-powered device, you can certainly stay connected if you have the proper data connections too. But nonetheless, as mentioned, this is going to be a line of storms that will continue to push to the east at roughly 25 miles per hour at this time. There's been some variability between the rate of motion with this line. 25 has been the latest observation. It has been speeding up, slowing down in some cases just from the individual small scale impulses that you can get from this line and the overall wind activity that it can provide. So there is going to be some steady ongoing movement of this action across Flint River counties through the next half hour and even beyond that. But this is not the main source of concern. I'm going to shift offshore. And even though this is outside of the severe thunderstorm warning area, this is a zone off into the northernmost Gulf where we do have more of this activity set to move onshore. When you have wind as healthy and flowing freely as it has been, especially over water, there's really nothing natural to slow down the flow of air when it's over a body of water. So you have very strong wind gusts within this region. I'm just going to scoot back and maybe log into this computer. So pardon my turning away from the camera because I do want to check what some of the observations are. There have been steady wind gusts, or maybe not steady gusts. It's a little erroneous to say that, but nonetheless, wind gusts have been, or winds sustained have been steady at or above 20 miles per hour along the coast, and frequent wind gusts upwards of 30 miles per hour or more. So you do have that steady, strong inflow in the lower part of the atmosphere. So winds are definitely very strong at the coast. You may even have noticed a little increase in the water levels at the immediate shore. And then we have this activity, which will continue to move in this very same general east-northeast fashion. So as the wind flow off of the Gulf and the Bay interact with this line, plus we have even more air motion, not to get too deep into things, but there's a zone of very fast winds going up about 20,000 feet within this zone, within southern Alabama and the Panhandle region. That's going to be an area of particular concern because that will help to build these areas of thunderstorms even more intense, even higher, and that's going to be something that can maybe make them a little stronger than what we're seeing over land right now. Based on that thought and the movement of these thunderstorms, this activity, which is south of Panama City, is likely to have an impact across some sections of the Forgotten Coast, probably in another couple of hours. So there is definitely going to be plenty to be concerned about when it comes to the overall strength of the storm as it's offshore now, set to move onshore later in the afternoon and through this evening. So things may be quiet where you are right now within the Metro Tallahassee area. Yes, there are some areas of rain that are passing through Wakulla County. That is not the squall line. Yeah, it's probably gusty and blustery and not too great, but that's not the main band that's set to come. This activity offshore is what I'm going to be focused on as far as more intensity reaching more areas later on in the afternoon, and that may stretch into the evening as well. Current time is 3:21 here on our digital live streams, tracking these severe thunderstorms that are moving into our westernmost areas. I will break away in about 5 minutes because there's going to be another on-air update that I'm going to provide to our viewers of ABC 27 over the air and through various video services, cable, satellite, and whatnot. So I will interrupt this stream to conduct that within the next 5 minutes or so. And once I step away, we'll certainly have the radar still looping, and then I'll come back once those duties are complete. Nonetheless, the thunderstorm band continuing to be very impressive in its overall form as it stands now. Even on the far northern edge of this band, there's been a newly issued severe thunderstorm warning. This is more so into the Albany metro area, Dougherty County, Worth County, and that is in effect, let's see, 4 o'clock. So it's the same expiration time as the one that's affecting more of our Flint River counties. And it's for the same general reason that we have the original warning. We have the overall threat of gustier winds with this. Not so much of a hail threat. I know that's been very minimally mentioned and just not really an overwhelming concern compared to other sources of storm action and storm elements. So it's mostly going to be the gustier winds that this squall line will produce as it moves more in an easterly direction. So southwest Georgia communities and counties getting in on the activity first, and simply because of the slight diagonal orientation, if you will, of that line, it's just natural for those interior sections to receive this activity first. And then eventually more of the Apalachicola vicinity, more so the Forgotten Coast, and then eventually more of this will sweep across more of our counties through the course of the late day and the evening. So that's going to be the progression of this over the next 3 to 6 hours or so. Not saying all the storms will last that long, but that's going to be the overall progress that's expected. And I think before I break away, I may actually transition into more of a forecast mode to give you an idea of just what may be anticipated in terms of timing and intensity with these storms. Now, keep in mind, I just mentioned the Wakulla County rain. Woodville, you're getting some rain. That's not the squall line rain, but it's a fairly hefty thunderstorm, and the first few lightning flashes have been detected. Curious if there's any other abnormalities, if you will, for this thunderstorm to exhibit, and right now I'm not seeing any. I still have the Barron skit tracker on there. It's not showing anything that's warranting any major concern. But just keep in mind, even outside of the squall line zone, spotty areas of rain can develop further and intensify and deposit heavy rain and produce some lightning even outside of this warned area. So that's something that is very important to keep in mind through the next few hours. I'm going to shift into that forecast mode. I know a lot of folks are probably asking, when will it get to my location? And here's a general idea based on our latest run of forecast and focus data. So this is a projection, a forecast of when this activity will reach certain areas. Going forward in time until 4, more of southwest Georgia will be covered, a little bit more of the western Big Bend. And then going farther into time by 5 o'clock, the projection is for that squall line to be near or east of the Flint River, approaching the Ocklawahamie River. So Tallahassee proper, be aware and on guard, perhaps around 5 o'clock, perhaps a little bit earlier than then for some areas of the Forgotten Coast. Going into 6 o'clock, 319 corridor. You might see a couple spots within this band that show a shade of purple. That's the computer model's indication that there could be some intensity even stronger than the general line within this zone. I wouldn't advise to focus specifically on a certain spot, but just the idea that maybe there is some data that supports a couple more of those more intense spots building within this line is certainly not a possibility that can be discounted necessarily. 7 p.m. starting to move into more of our eastern areas, I-75 South Georgia, and then beginning to approach the southeastern Big Bend and the Swanee River by about 8 o'clock. So that's a rough timeline of what's being anticipated with the movement of this line, and each of those phases there will be times where the winds will pick up and there could be even a slight risk for tornadic activity. So we cannot discount those possibilities at this current time. Current time is 3:26. I will go ahead and pause my coverage here on our digital streams because right around 3:30 there will be the need for me to go on the air and give a quick update. Once that is complete, I will come back here and continue the coverage of these severe thunderstorm warnings. Now, I do anticipate this is not going to be the last of the warnings for the evening. We'll probably be on here as long as we can. Of course, we have our 5 o'clock newscast, and I'll be involved in that. But Sammy is here. She will help me out, and she will also be very helpful in distributing information and answering questions on our social media pages. So I will return in just a few moments. I'll keep this radar stream going so folks who are watching can still be aware of where the storms are, the status of the warning, and other activity that may be impacting you or may impact you just down the road in a few hours. So I will be right back after I conduct my on-air cut-in. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for trusting us here at First Alert Weather with your storm needs.
I love you though.
All right, folks, if you were sticking around or watching us on ABC 27 just now, thanks for sticking around and keeping the stream going. We'll certainly help to keep you informed when we're not on the air. And of course, during our 5 o'clock broadcast, we will certainly have comprehensive coverage of the thunderstorm line. I would anticipate it impacting several of our counties during our newscast, so there's going to be a lot of updates during that time. As I mentioned earlier, I do have some assistance here while I analyze the radar and tell you the latest of the status of some of the warning action. Sammy is looking at the comments. She'll respond accordingly with a reply. But if there's a specific concern that you might have or something else that you may have seen, if this thunderstorm line has been through your area already, I encourage folks who are within the warning zone not to go outside and try to capture a picture or a video because it's just not safe to do that. But if it goes through and then you observe, well, a tree fell down the block from me, that would be something not cool, but it'll be something useful and helpful to at least know so it can be followed up and reported, because storm reports are very important to keep a record of what this storm has caused. Storm reports are tallied by the National Weather Service, and they can use the information in their assessments of what's been going on. So they're useful, but just wait until it passes you by before you try to go out and see what's been happening across your area. Nonetheless, we'll go back to some of the analysis tools. And right now, I must say the data is a little dirty, I guess you could say. It's not the highest quality that I've seen from velocity modes on radar before. So in my opinion, it's just not giving a very clear representation of what's been going on. But if you followed us over the years and know a little bit about what the green shades and the red shades mean, basic point is the brighter the color, the stronger the wind that's being detected on the radar sweep. And this is out of the Tallahassee radar. And right now, it's just not showing high quality data. The detection point is elevated at this level in Colquitt. At this time, about 10 minutes ago, it was estimated to be about 34 miles per hour at 7,000 feet. So again, that's not really a clear representation of what the thunderstorm itself is capable of when it comes to wind gusts. So I do wish that there were at least a little better data representation on there, but that's beyond my control. It is what it is. Nonetheless, this has had the tendency and the history of creating strong gusts. And now that we're going to start tapping into an additional surge of wind and air motion higher in the atmosphere to the west of the region, that's what's going to help to intensify some of these storms over the next half hour, and 2 hours into time. In fact, there's been a lot of the storm intensification going on, although no warnings yet here within the lower Apalachicola River area, no warnings for Gulf County or Southern Liberty yet. I would anticipate at least initially some marine warnings, and then if the thunderstorms still exhibit some strong wind potential, it's likely that some warnings will start to go into effect in the western side of the Big Bend area. So it may just be a matter of time before that occurs. Seems like there may be a little status update on some of this warned zone here. I'm just clicking off screen to give you an idea. We'll show this that it's still set to expire at 4. The thunderstorms were roughly 9 miles east of Bluntstown, moving east at 25 miles per hour, extending in a line northeast towards the Albany area, essentially. So again, if you're around the Flint River, now is definitely a time to make sure that you're inside before the storms come through. There's still some capability of this thunderstorm line to produce those gustier winds. It's not really showing an imminent tornado threat, so I'm not overly concerned about that with this section. However, it is noteworthy that in this portion here, you might see a little bit of a carving out of the Jackson County area, where it's been deemed that the thunderstorm that's over Jackson County is no longer severe. So that section of Jackson County, in fact the entire county, no part of Jackson County is in the warning. However, just on the opposite side of the river in Chattahoochee, you're still in the warning. So it's definitely a good idea as conditions deteriorate that you just keep it inside for a while until it starts to go by. If you are in Marianna, for example, the thunderstorm, you still have rain, you may still hear some thunder. The thunderstorm, the intensity of the thunderstorm, however, will diminish. But Bristol, you'll still probably be very, very close to where some of those stronger winds will come into play. And even though Bristol itself which is about right here. Not inside the warning, just barely though. Still close enough, especially considering the thunderstorms that are off to your southwest near Weewahitchka. That's likely going to keep on moving in this general movement, this direction, and Bristol, you'll get your fair share before too long. Same story for areas like Hosford, Rock Bluff, some of the state parks that are connected to those zones there in the western Big Bend. So just keep in mind, maybe settled where you are, may not be that way for long, and we'll have to see just how some of these storms begin to intensify over the next hour to see if there's any kind of need for additional alerts or warnings. Here's a better representation, better picturization of some of the wind gusts. This is how the Panama City radar, and if the Fort Rucker radar has any good quality. It doesn't seem to be as deep as the Panama City radar, but still, you do have the distance factor to keep in mind. Panama City is a good bit southwest of here, so the farther that radar beam travels, the less reliable the data is. But nonetheless, even at that elevated level, which here is about 4,000 feet, still some steady depictions of strong wind gusts at that high level. So as mentioned, it may sound redundant and repetitive, but there's still good reason for folks to maintain a higher level of alert, because these thunderstorms can still kick up quite a bit of wind and still create some pockets of damage. One thing I am slightly encouraged about is that we're this late into the day, and now we're just getting into the action, and even what I see across the interior sections of our region may not be particularly overwhelmingly strong. They're strong enough as they are, no doubt about that, but maybe not to the pure solid, nonstop sweeping of this gust front coming through the area. So at least for the short term, near the Flint River, you'll get roughed up a little bit, but maybe a little on the lighter side of the roughed up scale, if you follow me, compared to some areas that may get clipped or swept by this extent of the thunderstorm line here in the southern reaches, which will continue to make some progress towards the east and northeast. And some of those, they have a very favorable wind environment in the lower few thousand feet of the atmosphere. They are rather potent in their ability to produce more wind gusts. Let's check my data sources once again. Just skimming through, I don't really see much of a marine warning for those offshore waters, but there is a gale warning up, and that's just because of the very strong winds that have been in place even before thunderstorms get here. St. George Island over to Carabel, you get a few more of these individual thunderstorms or areas of rain, not really producing much lightning and thunder, but they have been developing in a spotty sense and rolling to the northeast. Some of those originating well offshore have now moved into Leon County, beginning to move into Thomas County. These are not squall line thunderstorms, but they are in a favorable environment to where you can get quick gusts and you can have some heavier rain. Some of those gusts could be on the stronger side, maybe 40 to 50 miles per hour, not necessarily warranting a severe thunderstorm warning out of any of this, but there is the potential that there will be inclement weather from this region here. And a little sampling now that this is a little bit closer geographically to the radar site in Tallahassee. It does have some decent wind gusts. I kind of hold back on that 71 mile per hour indication there, but considering the winds as strong as they have been, wouldn't surprise me if there were at least some indications of gustier winds. And I think if the data is more consistent about 55, 60, 70, a warning would go into effect there. We haven't had that yet. I haven't had an indication of that, but I'm sure the folks at the National Weather Service are analyzing that as they need to and as they are. And if a warning is needed, I'm sure they will issue one. Nonetheless, if you're in Thomasville, Metcalf, Boston, Georgia, perhaps even near Lloyd in Jefferson County, be aware it's not part of the broader line, but there can be some winds that can kick up pretty decently along with the heavy rain, and it's moving pretty swiftly towards the northeast. So Thomas County, Brooks County as well. Keep an eye on that one, because it may not necessarily be a harmless thing, especially if the winds are as high as what's being shown there. Again, I'm not going to put an exact figure on that and say this is definitely happening at this rate of speed, but just given the gusty nature that we've had today, not shocking if we do have some elevated wind gusts within that region. As mentioned before, another element we'll be monitoring is for individual spots within this thunderstorm that can at least favor not just straight winds, but maybe some rotating winds, even if it's in a slightly broader sense and does not ultimately produce a tornado. Just the overall fact that we've had a steady south wind pattern and winds may be at a slightly different angle, a little bit higher in the atmosphere, or the downdraft of the heavy rain from these interacting with that wind field, you can get some extra dynamics within that wind field, and that can certainly help to enhance a thunderstorm and make it more capable of creating a tornado situation. It's not imminent, and I don't see anything jumping out at me right now, but it is a factor that we cannot ignore under these conditions, especially when it comes to the overall setup that we've been anticipating for a few days and the result that we're starting to get in on now. You may have heard about some of the active weather upstream from this into the Savannah River area, the Carolinas. They've been hit pretty hard earlier today by numerous severe storms and likely tornadoes. I've been more focused on what's happening here, so I don't have all the details behind those. But nonetheless, it is going to be a pretty rough situation there for areas that have been impacted by storms. This is what I was talking about. I mentioned the word skits. It's a little technical, but it's simply our Titan radar system's ability to highlight a certain portion of the storm that may have a little more intensity. And you might be able to see that with this red arrow here. Now, I'll click on it. It'll bring up a whole bunch of different data here on this panel. It's showing that it's moving at a pretty high rate of speed. I'm discounting that a little bit. Some of the information there shows me that, yeah, it's a strong storm. And it's capable of keeping the wind gusts at a high level, but not necessarily something that's going to maybe kick off something more than what it is right now. We were talking about this just a few minutes ago, and here we have it, a severe thunderstorm warning. We were analyzing the velocity data right here on Titan radar, and by golly, there's our warning for sections of Leon County, Jefferson County, Thomas County, and Brooks County. This is in effect until 4:30, and it's likely for the same reasons we were discussing. This is something to keep an eye on, and that's exactly what that's exactly why I said that, because now we have a severe thunderstorm warning for this area. This thunderstorm moving northeast at about 45 miles per hour based on the information from the warning issued by the National Weather Service. Again, it's in effect until 4:30. You can get gusty winds out of this. Right now, no immediate indications of tornadic activity. Here's another valuable product that we can show you, the shear rates, and we'll describe that in greater detail as need be, but that can also kind of hone in on areas where there could be some of that modest twisting motion, and the redder and yellower the shade is, the stronger that rotation can be, and it can be more indicative of a possible tornado. Not seeing that right now, but weak shears being shown based off of the Barron radar system and the Titan Doppler radar analysis. So again, that is something that we'll continue to monitor for very closely, as well as maybe a few spots within this overall broad stretching thunderstorm warning, which is still in effect for another 15 minutes here in the Flint River area. But nonetheless, let's take a look at this one here. We'll go back and forth as time allows. Again, at 4 o'clock, I'll be giving another update on the air, but we'll keep this going as long as we can. Nonetheless, these are areas near Lake Miccosukee, for example. That's one zone that can get some gustier winds with this if you haven't already. And it's moving pretty swiftly. So there is a zone here which is about to cross the Leon-Jefferson County line. If the velocities are of any value with this, highlight just a couple spots. We do have at least some indications based on an elevation of about 800 feet of winds being measured at about 55 to 65 miles per hour. There's even a faster zone here which still says upwards of 70, so there is some consistency in that. So that is something to certainly keep in mind. If you are perhaps along the Veterans Memorial Highway there in northeastern Leon County, you may have some of those very strong wind gusts there. And zooming in a little more of a localized sense near the community of Concord, north of Mahan Drive along Miccosukee Road, which then transitions towards the state line near the Fincher vicinity in northernmost Jefferson County, just south of the state line. Metcalfe, Georgia, you'll also want to be on guard for this. You're included in this warning, and there is that broader zone where we do have those stronger elevated winds, so wind speed. So there's definitely a good opportunity to get in, not good in a positive sense, but a real opportunity to have some gustier winds within this zone here, separate from the actual squall line. Here towards Boston, Georgia, in between Thomasville and the Grady, or rather Brooks, Thomas County line. That's another zone with some strong wind gust potential within this region here. Again, data does tend to suggest some elevated wind speeds, enough to prompt the severe thunderstorm warning. These may not be exact figures of what's occurring in this region here in eastern Thomas County, but Patton, Pavo, Barwick, Boston is mentioned, perhaps even Easton and Newark. Those are zones that will continue to have some rough wind gusts to deal with as this activity pushes off towards the northeast fairly swiftly. So here's the 30-minute loop of what's been going on. This had started in the coastal and offshore areas, continuing to just feed into the overall very healthy wind environment and stretching itself out a bit, but still capable of causing some very strong winds within this boundary here. So this is clipping northwestern Jefferson County right now and moving more so into Thomas County. Thomasville, you are included in this warning until 4:30, severe thunderstorm warning that is. The thunderstorm itself is still a few miles to your south, and some portions, especially on the east side and perhaps the south side of Thomasville, you can get in on some of the action of this thunderstorm, even if it's not the heavy rain necessarily. But some of the gusty winds will likely start to infringe upon more of the Rose City. Maybe the strongest winds are staying just barely to your south, but those wind gusts will continue to kick up quite a bit over the next few minutes. So Thomasville and Thomas County proper, make sure that you are also taking appropriate measures to make sure you're staying inside, making sure you're protected from any of the wind force that this thunderstorm can otherwise provide. There's still a decent wind zone here within northeastern Leon County connected to this thunderstorm line based off of the velocity data that we're looking at. And there's still at least those brighter shades of red, which can often indicate those very stronger winds being detected at about 1,000 to 1,200 feet, still very strong in that level. And there's been very little doubt as far as the overall capability of those types of wind gusts to be achieved, especially that high in the atmosphere. But with the heavier rain, some of those stronger winds can be transported down to the surface, and that can certainly cause additional gust threats. So again, areas along the Jefferson-Leon County line between Miccosukee, Festus, and Fincher, those will be zones that will have some likely very strong wind gusts connected to this thunderstorm, and that can cause some problems. So certainly in that Lake Miccosukee area, you have to be on guard and stay inside. Just wait for the storm to go by. Don't try to go out, look out the window, because just if there's a tree branch that's falling down somewhere and it crashes through the window, God forbid, but still that's a risk that I don't think folks need to take. It may be unlikely, but given the winds as they are and the location of the thunderstorm, it's possible. Hopefully very little impact for areas underneath this thunderstorm, but we just can't disregard the danger that some of these storms can otherwise provide. We'll shift back to that in a few minutes. Right now it's 3:50, so around 3:55 I'll take another pause and I'll go over to the Weather Center or the weather board to do an on-air broadcast. But nonetheless, or a cut-in, not a full broadcast, but just to update folks who may be set to watch Judge Judy. I know that's a big show, and folks who are watching that, maybe not expecting storms, at least they'll be in the know, like you are right now by watching our digital streams. We're still monitoring this area here in the southern extent of the Apalachicola River. Right now it's situated Calhoun County, Gulf County, just offshore of St. Vincent Island by a few miles. That's still going to be a zone that we have to monitor very closely for impactful wind gusts within this thunderstorm. So that can be a source of hassle for folks later this afternoon and into the early evening for Franklin County, for Southern Liberty County, for Wakulla County, more than what you've seen so far. So those thunderstorms are likely still in an environment to where we will still have at least some intensification mode to be encountered, and that will likely trigger a few more warnings. So far, the warnings have been somewhat limited in overall scope. These are the first sets across our local counties. I would anticipate more. And yes, we still do have that tornado watch for the entire region. So there's still enough reason to make sure that you're staying alert, staying informed with these storms that have been evolving into these potent thunderstorms. And that will continue to be the case, especially as it appears, I would say, for the western Big Bend area through the rest of the evening. I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again, I'm somewhat encouraged that maybe the thunderstorm organization, just the overall solid line, is not quite as solid as what was originally believed. That can be a good thing, because if we had this huge, solid, uninterrupted red line way up here, that would probably mean a more prolonged thunderstorm event for these areas. And, at the top of the hour, when these warnings expire in the Flint River area in Albany, we'll see if there's any need for an extension or reissuance of any portion of these warnings. Of course, I don't do that. The National Weather Service folks issue those warnings. We'll see if there's any adjustments needed based on the strength of these storms. And usually there's at least a little heads up that they'll give if there's any kind of need for an adjustment. But so far, don't really see much of a heads up in that regard. Just reading through a few things briefly while we continue to conduct our coverage here. Nonetheless, through the next few minutes, 4 o'clock is the expiration time for the Flint River counties that are included in the original severe thunderstorm warning in northeastern Leon, northwestern Jefferson, most of Thomas, and most of western Brooks County. That warning is in effect until 4:30. So again, we'll come back on here after my on-air update to continue to let you know about what's going on across our region with these thunderstorms. And again, very breezy trend, very warm, very humid. It almost feels like it's in the middle of spring under these conditions, except with the wind. But it's the environment that is setting up to where we can see more intensification of these thunderstorms, especially around the state line counties and to the south. I do think we'll have a particular focus later on this evening or this afternoon here on the western side of the Big Bend coast. If there are any active storms that are set to move in from those bands of thunderstorms that are positioned over the Gulf right now, that will be a source of concern when it comes to intensity and overall strength and what kind of effects they can have on our own local weather this evening. So thunder and lightning has been accompanying some of these thunderstorms, hence the name thunderstorm, right? But it hasn't been the type where we see thousands of lightning strikes. Not quite that juiced up when it comes to the actual lightning production. But nonetheless, any one of these spots can certainly cause a few lightning flashes, and you hear thunder after you see lightning in a short amount of time. Definitely enough reason to just keep it indoors even without any kind of warning. Plus, with all the breezes and wind going on, it's just been tough to be outside to enjoy the day to any major extent. So, maybe this is a good reading a book afternoon or evening, especially for kids who didn't go to school because school was canceled or had to come home early because some of the storms that were anticipated to affect us right about now. So that's what we're facing right now. It's about 3:55. A little interesting feature here on this portion of the thunderstorm. Not really seeing an opposing wind force here. So again, not very concerned about any kind of circulation. The shear markers, I think that's a little skewed just based off of this erroneous data point here. So even though there's a shear marker there, or at least a shear path that shows something more significant, I'm kind of discounting that for the time being. But nonetheless, any little adjustments when we get new forecast or new radar data coming in, it gives us a new source, a new batch of data to analyze and look at. And if there are some tornadic indicators within any of these, we'll certainly be on top of that potential, and we'll relay that information to you. We'll make sure you are informed as adequately as possible in an event of any kind of developing situation more or worse than what we have right now. So 5 minutes until the top of the hour, I'm going to get prepared for my update on our over-the-air broadcast channel. So we will be back in the next few minutes after I complete that to give you more guidance and more information about the storms. I know you may have questions, comments, concerns. Sammy is monitoring the comment feed. If there are questions that can be easily addressed by her, she will respond to you back through the the timeline, and if there's anything of particular interest or concern, maybe I can address it and help you understand it a little better when it comes to just why we're having these storms or why things are acting the way they are today. But nonetheless, we'll be back. I'll be back in just a few moments after I complete the next update for our on-air channel starting at 4 o'clock. All right, folks, I am back here on our Facebook live stream, and if I'm not mistaken, we're streaming on other means, perhaps on our website. The digital folks can let me know if that is indeed the case, but nonetheless, we have a new swath of severe thunderstorm warning. It encompasses many counties, and it's part of that same line that we've been monitoring coming in from the eastern panhandle, extending into the Gulf. Now it's beginning to move closer to our western Big Bend County. So Gadsden County, Liberty County, a good portion of Franklin County, and southern Decatur County, all included in this latest severe thunderstorm warning, now in effect until 5 o'clock. So there's been a little more action that's been accompanying this line. It's getting closer to our county, so this is just a natural progression of how these thunderstorm warnings tend to be issued when there's such a broad band that's been forming and holding itself together. It's been holding itself together better than what we've seen in South Georgia, and by better I mean stronger. The stuff that's around the Flint River, especially north of Bainbridge, encountering a weakening trend. We did not see a renewal or a reissuance or a reconfiguration of any warnings there, at least at this current time, but now there's more focus to the south. There's also going to be a need for a focus for some of these individual thunderstorms or areas of rain, like here, like down there. They're not looking all that impressive right now, but you can get a stronger overall wind profile just ahead of a squall line, which can maybe ramp up the strength of these. And that's not to say something is definitely going to form from those like a tornado. I'm not saying that at all. Just saying the possibility still is in place where these individual pockets, just like the one in Thomas County, it started off as a little speck of rain and then became a more organized feature, which still has capability of creating some wind gusts. That is still a real possibility with what's in Thomas County now and what may be coming our way even to the south of this region. An important note to let you know of as far as our broadcasting abilities, I understand that we took a power hit and that some of our over-the-air broadcast is not up. If you have us on Comcast, I believe we still have capabilities there where we are broadcasting normal programming. So perhaps if you are more reliant on over-the-air broadcast, and again, this I'm not sure with the source of this, but keeping in mind that our transmitting site is in Metcalf, and that is within the warn zone. That may be a factor in things as far as our ability to keep that over-the-air signal going. So again, I don't know the exact issue, but it is worth mentioning that this is part of that same thunderstorm that created the warning in Thomas County and may have interfered with our ability to broadcast over the air. But I do think our fiber connection with cable providers still may be intact, and you still may be able to watch us there. So in case someone's calling, it's like, I can't see Judge Judy, and you're watching this, and maybe you can give them that as a possible reasoning behind it. With that said, let's focus in. Now, I don't necessarily want to go into each and every segment of the line. I can probably do it, have a little more flexibility, but nonetheless, anywhere within Liberty County, you'll likely get in on some of these strong gusts of wind. Western Gadsden County first, Lake Talquin, that will be a zone within the next half hour or so where gusty winds can occur. There is a spot that's being indicated for maybe a little more intensity here within, it looks like Gulf County and more to the southwest of the region, but moving in a northeasterly fashion. So it is a point of interest. We'll see if there's some consistency with that, and even if there isn't, let's go ahead and just analyze that one spot, take that marker off. If there's a little extra intensity going on with the wind patterns here, certainly a possibility that there could be something more. There's definitely a very healthy indication of wind activity within this. And again, this is elevated wind indication at about 4,500 feet. Where the winds are pretty swift, and being near that body of water, again, I mentioned earlier in this stream, nothing interferes with the flow of air over water, so you can certainly get some very strong wind indications based off of these remote indicators like a radar. So there is consistency, at least in the movement of that one spot. We'll see if there's any sort of healthy shear. That means just the change of wind speed or direction in a small tight area. And right now it looks kind of weak when it comes to the shear potential, or at least the history of its shearing capabilities. Just not incredibly strong, but we'll still monitor this for the necessary ingredients that may come together for something more than this. And this is in Gulf County, but again, moving in a northeast fashion. So this could be one zone where maybe a little bit of intensification is possible, or at least already strong activity is possible or set to occur in Gulf County, and that can make more of an aim towards Liberty County in general. Western Leon County, Western Wakulla County, you are included in this broader severe thunderstorm warning until 5 o'clock. Spotty rain that you may be getting in and around Lake Talquin is not directly connected to the squall line, but it is going to certainly influence the damp, wet pattern that we are beginning to experience. And then probably in the next 30 minutes to 45 minutes, you'll have a faster deterioration in weather conditions, which can get some of those wind gust threats to become more realistic within that time span. So what I wanted to do was just check in on some of these thunderstorms. I say thunderstorms in general. These here near Alligator Point and St. Teresa, they're not really thunderstorms by definition because I don't see any lightning or thunder. But they are spots that look a little interesting just by their shape. But it's more than a shape that we look for. It's more of what's happening within that. And the Doppler radar mode can help us at least detect a few of these spots with maybe some modest broad rotation or weak rotation, certainly a good, strong, healthy wind pattern out of some of these individual spots. So there's still certainly the bona fide wind gust threat out of some of these areas of thunderstorms again with air quotes, that are coming in through Appalachia Bay. Some of those will pass over land and likely impact sections of Franklin or Wakulla counties near the coasts and the bays. So that is one threat that we'll have to monitor very closely through the next hour or two, just to make sure and to just keep a watch on those to make sure hopefully nothing happens, but if something does happen, we can stay on top and give you advance notice of that, of any kind of threatening weather. So wanted to let you know that we're getting some official information about the technical difficulties that we're getting. Folks here are working on getting the signal back up and running, so if you cannot see us, we are available. The severe weather action is available on our website, and as you found us here on our Facebook stream, you do have that source as well. I can't directly contact my digital folks to see if we're on our apps or if we are actually streaming on our website. Hopefully we are, and if they're listening, hopefully they can check on that and verify that we are using those capabilities as well to reach as many folks as possible. Those South Georgia thunderstorms, aside from Thomas County, again, a little bit of a less favorable environment here for continued intensity. It wouldn't surprise me if something still can ramp up from what's happening here to the south. There's still that possibility over the next few hours, but nonetheless, thunderstorms are certainly becoming a little more focused near coastal counties and just a couple counties inland from the coast, and that's where I think most of the action will be going into the rest of this afternoon and through the evening time frame with these thunderstorms that are likely to still create a wind gust threat. They're still a good distance away from Tallahassee, although you'll have more times of rain coming in from these little spots coming in from the south. They're moving pretty swiftly, so yes, you can get a good drenching rain over a short amount of time, and perhaps some winds kicking up with that as well. But at least when it comes to impending severity of these, not really seeing much of that at this current time. Some of the wind velocities do not appear to be all that intense with this, but again, it's just been breezy all the while, and even if you go off of some of these, again, you do get the effect of higher elevation where these are being detected. So the 58 and the 54 mile per hour markings, those are about 1,000 feet from the surface there in Wakulla County. So yes, you can certainly have some gustier winds with some of these. They may not be as well organized as the main rain band that's to the west, but even as that starts to set in and lift in, we will get in on the activity that will help to cause weather to worsen over the next few minutes. And I'll put that little storm tracker, the SKIT tracker, back on just for its purpose to ingest data and update it as it sees fit. But nonetheless, those Thomas County thunderstorms, and again, thunderstorms in just a general broad sense, they're still pushing pretty swiftly to the northeast into sections of Brooks County where we do have that warning, but then extending even beyond that. So Colquitt County, Georgia, mostly east of 319, and then connecting with Interstate 75 near Lenox and Omega and Tifton. So that's still a zone where we can have some gusty winds from time to time. The wind gusts based on this distant zone, again, I think that's elevated about 4,000 feet. So it does make sense that winds that high are that fast, 75 miles per hour. Not necessarily translating into what you experience at ground level, but it is a sure testament of just how swift the air is moving. If you stood outside before any storms got nearby and you just saw the clouds just moving right along, sometimes you look up and don't see clouds hardly moving at all. But today it's just been a steady stream. You even stand out there a minute and it looks like they've just zipped right on by. That's the evidence of a very strong wind flow, even in the lower few hundred feet or lower couple thousand feet of the atmosphere. So that's an indication that that the wind pattern is favorable for these storms to build rather swiftly and intensely, even in a short amount of time. Maybe one limiting factor could be the overall lack of sunshine. It may have helped to at least decrease some of the available energy in the atmosphere. Which is why maybe here on the northern extent of this line, we're seeing more of a weakening trend with these thunderstorms across interior South Georgia. Less of a weakening trend. In fact, I wouldn't even say a weakening trend here in our Big Bend section. But even as you move north of the state line, the thunderstorms tend to become a little more broad, less organized, still capable of causing some heavy rain, but maybe those less intense wind gusts are being clocked within this zone here across interior southwest Georgia. But in the western Big Bend, that's where we still have to monitor things very closely. Again, you still have a good buffer of time for areas like Tallahassee. You'll have some rain coming through within a few minutes coming in from the south, and maybe some of those can kick up the wind gusts a bit. But it's going to be this main line here, which stretches along the Apalachicola River. That's going to be a zone, and especially if there's individual spots of thunderstorms or areas of stronger wind gust potential, such as what this zone tends to show near the Wewa-Hitchcock area, moving into southwestern Liberty County. That could be one of those smaller scale portions of the main band that can be a little more problematic. There's the latest storm marker there. Let's clear some of the data there and just throw on the data and just rummaging through it. Maybe a bit of hail falling from that, moving pretty swiftly. Still a minimal amount of tornadic activity, or not tornadic activity, but tornadic potential within that. But still very healthy winds, even based off of the velocity data here, where this little sharp area of bright green indicating where the highest wind gusts are, if they keep moving in that general path, this will likely be capable of crossing Highway 65 here in Liberty County over the next few minutes. So north of Sumatra, maybe around the Wilma area, Central City, and some of those other locations along 65, and perhaps getting closer to more of the more heavily populated areas of Liberty County, such as Clio, Teloja, and Hosford. Those could be some areas that can get in on this. We'll have to monitor this very closely to see just how that zone of indicated strong gusty winds, just how it moves based on the environment around it, so we can have some some decent impacts. Decent, not positive, but decent as in obvious storm impacts that can be created if that sort of wind gust is verifiable. But it is consistently being indicated on the radar sweep, and that's part of the reason why the warning is in effect. And considering its movement to the east and maybe that one lone spot more to the northeast, there's certainly plenty of reason to continue a close watch on that. What I'll do in the time that we have left before 4:25 is maybe zoom in on a couple of these individual spots, especially that one area here, just beginning to pass through the Apalachicola River, moving east of Wewa-Hitchcock. Put a little storm track on that, considering its movement. Let me verify its rate of movement based on the data that we just had. Let's see, going into, okay, I'm just reading a few things off screen, so pardon my interruption there. Just want to get some of the movement, some of the idea of what some of the analysis is showing. Since I've been doing more storm tracking than analysis as of late, definitely want to make sure I stay on top of some of the data feeds that are available. All right, back to what I was trying to do. You know, you have to juggle a lot of different things and different sources of information. Sometimes you lose track of what you originally set out to do. So again, pardon my brief interruption there. And now we seem to have maybe a data connection issue, or did it just come through? Anyhow, there we go, we got it. All right, so this is moving pretty quickly. And we'll put a storm track on that. And again, please pardon my interference there with my overall train of thought. But in this batch of thunderstorms, just considering how fast it's moving, it's estimated to move at about 60 miles per hour. So if this were to keep on moving in this same general direction, several of the communities along Highway 65 will be impacted by this within the next 10 minutes. Probably in about 30 to 45 minutes areas, perhaps in southern Gadsden County, and then a higher likelihood that maybe some areas near the Ochlockonee River between Gadsden and Leon County, probably by, we'll say, about 5:15 or so. So there will still be some times where weather will be not so great, especially during the 5 o'clock hour, it appears. If this segment of the thunderstorm, as it's projected to do, keeps moving northeast, you might even see, even without any kind of additional analysis, there's a little bit of a curvature, a little bit of a bend there within some of the radar data. Sometimes that indicates the outflowing winds that are very strong within this region, and that can be an indicator of just where the strongest outflowing wind gusts can be. That is a zone that we'll monitor, and that's a pattern that we'll continue to watch as well, especially considering the possible trajectory, which will take it in the general direction of the Ochlockonee River and the Lake Talquin area in the next 45 minutes or so. Certainly enough to be a little more concerned about the effects that this band of storms can produce in some of our central and western Big Bend counties, especially during the 5 o'clock hour. We will be technically on the air if our technical issues get fixed. Everybody can see it, but depending on the repair of those technical issues, we have our digital means that will be up and running. No interference with those, so you can check us out at WTXL.com/live, live streaming on our news and the Storm Shield app as well. So if you turn on your TV, you can't get us on the air, you can certainly still get us through our digital streams, just like what we're doing right now for about another 5 minutes. And then at 4:30, I'll come back, maybe discuss for another 10 minutes, and then I'll conclude the stream and begin the transition into our broadcast. So I'll start to wind things down here on the stream right around 4:40 or so, unless there's some late-breaking weather development that warrants ongoing discussion, or perhaps an on-air advisory for whatever may form at that time. Just giving you the possibilities, not a certainty that will have to go that way. Put back that storm tracker, see if anything else pops up. And again, here in the offshore waters approaching St. Vincent Island and the mouth of the Apalachicola River, the western side of St. George Island, that will be a zone that gets in on rougher weather in a little while. One thing I had taken off is the lightning tracker, and if it needs a little catching up to do with the data stream, we'll probably see that coming up shortly when it comes to the amount of lightning. In fact, we're not looking at excessive amounts of lightning, but in that one zone where we did have the little extra intensification that was connected to this band of very strong winds over the Apalachicola Forest, that's a zone with intensifying lightning count, and that could be an indication that there is still some considerable strength with that portion. There's not as much lightning in some of the other portions of this line. We do have more lightning strikes offshore. Not as many across inland areas, but definitely that zone in southwestern Liberty County, that's going to be something to watch very closely next half hour, next 45 minutes, just to see exactly what kind of other storm elements can be produced within that band. There is that corresponding increased lightning count right within that zone, so that is something that can certainly be problematic for areas in central and southern Liberty County, and perhaps we'll see if that carries through into the Ochlockonee River area. So there's plenty of reason, even though it may not seem like it's very bad weather for you right now, especially if you have the warning, if you're in Quincy. Yes, some rough weathers to your west, some heavier rain, and some general wind gusts are around you, but it may not seem all that intense. I wouldn't necessarily discount the possibility of perhaps more intense weather coming your way, not necessarily specifically for Quincy, but just in this general area near the Ochlockonee River, Wakulla, Leon, Gadsden County. Plenty of reasons to still keep watch on some of what's going on. The shear rates are not all that high within this zone here. And again, we use the shear rates to try to identify where there may be areas of lower level circulating air and motion, which can indicate at times possible tornadic development, but we're not seeing that in any major extent right now, as well as other shear markers. The main storm threat that we may be able to identify in general. Certainly the heavy rain, definitely some gusty winds. We haven't talked much about hail, but there may be at least a few points within this thunderstorm band where the cloud tops are high enough where you can get the cycle that would support some hail development. So that is certainly something to keep in mind as well. It may not be huge amounts of hail, and it's not specifically noted in the severe thunderstorm warning, but there is that possibility that we can certainly have times of brief hail in some of the more intense spots within this band. I mentioned earlier how sometimes you see a little bit of a curve with this. Sometimes with the curve, it's not just outflowing wind, but we may also have to be alert about how the outflowing wind, like so, connects with the inflowing wind, kind of like that. So sometimes we get a little bit of a notch feature, which was what we would call it, which can indicate that maybe winds are flowing enough into here to where you can get a little circulation forming. Not really seeing that in high amounts of evidence quite yet. It still looks like mostly straight line winds there, but they do look fairly intense there. I guess if there's any fortunate feature or a fortunate point about that, it's in lightly populated areas and mostly over the forest. I do know there are at least a few neighborhoods in there, and people can be impacted by that, and we don't want to necessarily downgrade that reality. But at least if this were to come right over Tallahassee, that could certainly have a higher impact for a greater amount of people. And again, not to say it's not as important, but nonetheless, it's just a fact that if we do have those strong gustier winds in more of the metro area, that can create many more problems. So again, patterns that we do have to monitor very aggressively and deeply over the next several minutes. I've been talking for a while. I'm going to pause for a couple minutes and prepare for our final update here on our main channel, which again, we did encounter some broadcasting difficulties. They are being worked on to restore any service that may have been interrupted. But if you are still connected through Comcast or any other cable service or satellite service, that's great. We'll stay on for you as long as we can through the entire event. And of course, either way, we'll start our newscast at 5 o'clock with the latest information on what's going on. But I'll take a brief break. I'll keep this radar stream going so folks who join in can see where the storms are, where the warnings are. And I'll come back a little bit after 4:30 with more narration on what's going on and what's likely to come. All right, folks, I have about 5 minutes left on this stream to track these storms, and of course, there's some prep I need to do for the newscast. We'll be broadcasting that, and again, to reiterate that some may have some difficulty receiving our signal through a technical issue likely connected to some of the storms that were passing through near our transmitter site. Those issues are being worked on. If you can get our signal, if you do get our signal through cable or satellite, that's great. You can keep watching. If you cannot get our signal through over the air and you have internet access, you can go to our website, WTXL.tv or WTXL.com. Look for the Watch Live symbol that's in the upper right. You should be able to watch it through your computer. Download our news app, and there's a means to get on there as well. Just search WTXL News in your app store, download it, and you'll be connected, even though we may not be able to broadcast because of some difficulties that we have been encountering. Nonetheless, the thunderstorm line continues to linger, maybe not linger, but there is the likelihood that the thunderstorm activity will still continue to swing in our general direction, in the general direction of the western and central Big Bend area. Interior South Georgia, you've had your share around the Flint River, but things have been settling down quite a bit. There's a little less available energy for those storms to work with. Still some rain, still gusty at times, but maybe not so much of a actual severe weather, acute severe weather threat. It's this band of rain that's currently situated here just east of the Apalachicola River, beginning to move through the Gretna-Greensboro area of Gadsden County. Quincy, you're about to get in on some of the storminess. It'll start to reach Midway in probably the next 20 minutes or so, and that's where we are, our actual studio facilities. This will continue to push its way through the Ocklawahnee River area between Leon, Liberty, and Wakulla County, and then perhaps for Wakulla County proper, especially on the far southwest end. It may be a little while before the stronger elements of the storm get to you, just because of the way the line is shaping up. It's still straddling the Apalachicola River over St. Vincent Island and St. Vincent Sound, and east of the mouth of the Apalachicola. So it still may be a little while before it gets to more of Wakulla County, but we still have at least these indications of higher lightning count in a few spots within this thunderstorm band, now beginning to make its way on the northern side of Liberty County. Bring back some of those products that we were able to look at as far as wind forces go. And yes, there's still some healthy indications of gusty winds here in the Hosford, Toloja, Clio area, where at least based on the velocity mode, winds have been able to reach about 60 or so miles per hour, about 1,200 feet off the surface, 12 to 1,500 feet. So that, coupled with the heavy rain, it can transport some of those stronger wind gusts down to the surface, and that's a possibility that can be encountered there. And some of that action is making general headway towards the Lake Talquin vicinity. Southern Gadsden County, southwestern Leon County, the Fort Braden area, perhaps around Wetumpka, along the Pat Thomas Highway. Those could be some zones where some of this activity, which is producing some gusty winds here in the velocity mode, keeps on moving and may give some more areas into southern Gadsden County some strong wind gust potential over the next several minutes. So that is something to keep in mind if you are within that region. Fort Braden, Bloxham, south of Quincy, south of I-10, and along 267 where it connects with Highway 20, Blountstown Highway. Those will be some zones where you can get some very strong wind gusts coming out of this thunderstorm, and we'll have to monitor where it goes from there, because there is a high likelihood, or at least a reasonable likelihood, that some of those strong gusts of wind can certainly continue to move in the northeasterly direction and maybe reach more areas of perhaps Gadsden County and western Leon County by 5 o'clock. Also thunderstorms that will be moving into the Apalachicola River area, the southern extent, the mouth of the river. Those will keep lifting to the northeast, and those will also have the potential for some gustier winds in Franklin County along the coast from Apalachicola through East Point, Carabel, St. George Island, Dog Island, and right through the St. Teresa area, probably within the next 45 minutes. So this will likely stretch beyond the current time of the severe thunderstorm warning, and that will be something to monitor very closely, not just we here in the First Alert Weather Center, but also you that may potentially be in the path of these. Let's go through the forecast data for one more time before we transition off of these digital streams and back onto our broadcast. This is the expectation based on the current time. Here's how it looks by 5, continuing to march to the east. There's still at least a few of these spots. You might see these shades of kind of like a purplish magenta sort of color. That's where at least the model data indicates where we could have a little more wind intensity with this. And again, I hesitate to focus on any one specific geographic point, but just the general possibility that, yes, there will be times like that one zone in Liberty County where the winds can gust a little bit more aside from the broader wind gust environment. So that's something to consider. 6, 7 p.m. We'll start to see more of the activity that may lift more into the I-75 and Swanee River area. So you may be sitting at home in like Live Oak and thinking, where are the storms? Where are the storms? Wait a few hours. They're likely to come your way. And if and when they do, we'll continue to cover them for you either on air or right here through our digital media. But for now, I do need to prepare for the broadcast, which is coming up in less than 20 minutes. I'm First Alert Chief Meteorologist Casanova Nurse. Thank you so much for following along with us here on our Facebook live stream and other digital streams. Hopefully it was useful and informative to you, and we'll continue that helpful, informative mode of work that we are doing through our newscast between 5 and 6:30. And after that, if there's more storms to track, we'll certainly come back on here and to help you get through it all. Thanks again for watching us, and we'll be on air at 5 and then back here on digital streams after our newscasts.